Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the Moza Mini MX. It's one of the newest mobile gimbals on the market, and Moza was kind enough to send it to me, and I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. So I do have to let you know that they did provide me this gimbal. However, they made no stipulations on how the review is to go or what I should say. None of that nonsense here on this channel. They're going to be watching the video at the same time you guys are. That's the way it's supposed to go. So I will be giving you my thoughts on this little guy. So I guess we should start by talking about who this is for. Now, gimbals, there's tons of them now, isn't there? It used to be only like a few options. Now, like, everyone's making gimbals, and every company that makes gimbals makes tons of gimbals in like every shape and size. Now, the point of having a tiny one is the portability. Now, they do make a few larger phone gimbals that have their purpose, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But a tiny one that you can just put in your back pocket or coat pocket, just slip it in there, or just hide in a purse or something, means that it's meant to be traveled with, and traveled with inconspicuously, and not, not burdening you in any way, shape, or form. So this guy is made specifically for vloggers, maybe a few travel videos, and for, well, like social media streaming and live streaming and that kind of thing. And it is impressive how they managed to design a 3-axis gimbal this small. Now, the design that's it's most similar to is the DJI Osmo 4 or OM4. That one is also a 3-axis gimbal with a tripod at the bottom of the handle. Let's unfold this guy actually. So this is its entire footprint once unfolded, and it is tiny. And now it's made a little bit differently. The design of the handle is made at a more comfortable angle, and I think the ergonomics is a really nice design feature. It also has a 1/4-inch threading at the bottom so that you can mount the tripod footing here. And you can either use this as an extra handle for stability, which doesn't work well for me because I've got really big hands, so anyone with small hands would do well with this, but like for me, it's just kind of hard to get my hands on it. But I think for some people this would be good for extra stabilization when you're doing like FPV pan shots. But it's also good because then you can just plunk it down on a table and then use it for, doing some face tracking shots. Also, what I've seen some people do is they take this off and then mount a extra microphone at the bottom if your phone has the jack to do that. But it also supports Bluetooth microphones in the Moza GENIE app. So if you have a Bluetooth microphone that you want better quality audio from, you can mount it to that just fine. One of the things that I should mention is that for larger phones, like mine, I have the OnePlus 7 Pro, which is about as big of a phone as you could really get. Like right here, for example. Can you hear the scraping? So when the clips are outstretched this far, it can cause a little bit of scraping, and then it just doesn't handle the movement as well. So that is kind of a physical limitation of making one this small. So if you have a smaller phone than me, which probably a huge percentage of you will, you probably won't run into that problem, and you'll probably have smoother footage because of it. And the fact that the arms are just this small means that the weight and the pendulum movements that help stabilize things in a way by the counter turning, I guess you would call it, is a little bit more limited. Now, the motors do work really well, but I'm just saying that bigger arms means it's easier to stabilize. So for some micro jitters, it might be a little bit trickier to deal with. However, I will say that it does seem to be tuned best for walking. Now, when walking and even running with this thing, I was impressed by how smooth everything stayed. And that just goes further into who this is designed for. The mobile vloggers who hold their camera out like this, and it's just comfortable being able to hold it like this instead of having one like this where you have to hold it straight. Having it in a more ergonomic position means that you can have, just a more comfortable experience holding this while you're recording yourself walking down the street. Physically, I think it's designed as well as it can be for such a small, compact little thing like that. Now, I will mention some of its competition here. This is probably the smallest mobile gimbal I have ever seen, and I don't know if you can physically get smaller than this and even be useful. This is the GENIE Smooth X. Now, I don't want to take the attention away from the Moza Mini. However, I think this is notable to mention for one specific reason. To get them smaller, this is only a 2-axis gimbal. It's not 3-axis, so it's one less axis of stabilization, which you can definitely tell. Like, some of the footage just isn't great. However, it's kind of like a stabilized selfie stick. So there's that, and you can kind of see how some companies are trying to work around these small designs and figure out what the best use case is for. This is also made for mobile vlogging, though it's more of a smart, stabilized selfie stick than a true gimbal. But it does offer a lot of the same features. But this is just, I think, overall better design, because that one quit on me. The Smooth X, it died. It doesn't work anymore. For no good reason. No abuse, nothing. Just motors quit. So, maybe I'll finish my review on that at some point soon. But, however, no such issues so far with the Mini MX. Now, I do like the button layout design. Everything can be operated with one hand nice and comfortably. They did a good job with that. It is time, however, to talk about the app. And that is where I can see the need to make improvements. And honestly, all my criticisms lay with the app. I think physically, whoever designed this did as good of a job as is humanly possible to make this kind of thing. I can't see how I would change anything. It's honestly really well done. The app needs some tweaking, because I either don't think it's finished, or not a lot of thought and attention went into it. And I think we'll go with my biggest pet peeve, and that is the bitrate. The bitrate on the videos in the Moza GENIE app are bad. For example, I'm not gonna expect, things that a phone just isn't capable of doing. However, in my native camera app, which you can use the gimbal with, by the way, just you miss out on some of the key features that make the gimbal more valuable, and I'll get into that in a second. But however, the native camera app on my phone, I can shoot 4K 60 at 160 megabits a second. And that's a really high bitrate. That's like really good. And not a lot of compression, and honestly, I can be pretty impressed with the quality for a phone that's not even that new. 4K on the Moza GENIE app, you're first of all limited to 4K 30 and not 60, which is an issue when you're trying to get B-roll shots and you want to improve the smoothness and slow things down to 40%, which is usually my go-to trick in the normal camera world. It doesn't allow that. It's only 4K 30. However, at 4K 30, you only get 40 megabits a second. And that's just straight doo-doo. Because it especially just doesn't look great. Phone cameras need all the help they can get as it is. So only being able to do 4K 30 at 40 megabits a second, I just don't understand why. And honestly, I'd have to try it on more phones. Maybe the mileage varies, or maybe they're trying to make a standard file format so that it can work across more than one phone. I'm just not sure exactly why they've limited it to such a poo-poo quality, honestly. And then even at 1080, the quality is like 19 megabits a second, which is not good. And if you're uploading to social media after that, it's gonna, further degrade the compression further. And that's just not acceptable. Usually you want to start as high as you can so that any downgrade from there will be improved. And most people will be uploading their videos at 1080p, but I always like to start with 4K because then you can downsample to 1080 and make that look as good as possible. I did find it interesting that you can shoot in up to 240 frames a second in 1080, and it's not baked in slow motion, whereas on my native camera app, it does bake it in. You can choose to reframe it afterward to slow it down to your desired percentage, which I think is cool. The problem is, the bitrate is still 19 megabits a second at 240 frames. So that means that each frame is even substantially worse quality, which makes it in the end much less usable, unless it's just like family gag videos, that don't really matter. But, for people who are spending money on gear, I mean, I think they would want better quality. So that's my biggest gripe, and I really, really hope that they fix that, because that is a software issue, which means that it's not like hardware bound. So that means that there could be an update that fixes that, and I just really hope they do. Moza, if you're listening, please help me out here. We'll move on to the next key feature, I think, for this gimbal and the app is the face tracking. Now, I've watched a few other reviews because I wanted to see other people's experiences with this gimbal so far, and one guy did point out that the face tracking worked great for him. You know, they've mapped it to the gimbal to just be one trigger press, which I think is cool because once you press that, it activates face tracking. And that means that if you're focusing on yourself or some other subject, it will make sure that the gimbal moves along with them to keep their face in frame. And that's a great feature. However, with me, face tracking didn't work once. Just wanted to insert a quick side note here. After a little further testing, I could get the face tracking to work on the back-facing camera, but the front-facing camera still fails to work with face tracking. So back to the video. And that could be exclusive to my phone. I don't know whether the experience, changes per phone. It's kind of hard to say. I don't have a ton of phones to just, try it all out on. So your mileage may vary there. However, object tracking did work really well. It just was an extra step by, just touching the screen and drawing a bounding box around my face, which isn't that bad. It's just nice to be able to use a trigger to do face recognition. It means like one less thing to cut out of your final, footage. And the object tracking did work really well. Being able to use that, especially like if you want to set it down on a table, and then, if you're moving around talking, like say you're making a cooking video for something and your face is seen in the footage at all times, as long as you're not doing any crazy fast movements, I think it works really well. And I believe it can also be used in live streaming, which is also a super useful feature. Like I said, this would be useful for people who live stream a lot on social media. So being able to face track at the same time, if you're going to be moving around a little bit in frame, that is useful, and I think that is a really nice feature to have. It does offer a few other features that I think are cool, like it does have built-in filters, or you could call them LUTs, but they're more or less filters that if you aren't really comfortable or don't understand like color correction in post, and you just want to apply a standard filter, you can pick one in the app, and they have a good amount of decent ones, and then just go with that every single time. So that's pretty cool that it has that. I won't be using it because I prefer to do the color correction myself. Another cool feature is the fact that you can change your aspect ratio for the recorded footage itself. And being able to rotate the gimbal into vertical mode is pretty useful for those cases as well. One of the things I thought was cool that I never really see in camera apps is the fact that you can do the 21:9 aspect ratio, which is the super long cinematic aspect ratio, which is cool. Again, it's held back by the bitrate though, so you're not really going to be doing anything truly cinematic if your bitrate is just straight doo-doo. So please, Moza, fix your bitrates. But it is nice, and I wish that more camera apps had that ability. They also have like a kind of like GENIE template mode, which means that it kind of guides you through different shots to take that are a predetermined length and then adds audio on top of it.
If at times you feel you want to cry, and life seems such a trial, above the clouds there's a bright blue sky, so make your tears a smile.
And I can't really see any real useful use for this. Maybe if you're trying to get ideas on how to shoot B-roll, I don't know. But again, it just looks bad in the end, so I don't know. That's just a gimmick that I find unnecessary to add. So I think I've mentioned all that I really want to say for the pros and cons for this type of gimbal. Let me know in the comments about what you think. Maybe I missed something. I don't know. I've kind of been gabbing for a while now. But I definitely wanted to give you guys my thoughts on that. There are a lot of people went through in depth of what the app has and its features, and a lot of people sung its praises, but I found it important to mention what some of the potential downsides are, especially when you're trying to compare it to other gimbals. And right now there's just so many gimbals to choose from, and it's great that companies are, trying to improve their designs and give you a lot of good options, and just weigh those pros and cons, man. Final thoughts. I think this is a compelling device for traveling people, vloggers, and the like. It is very compact and physically very well designed for what it is. And I think it has a lot of potential. I just really hope that they update things software side, because those bit rates, man, those will get you. And I think it's important to note too that there probably isn't much improvement even on other apps. I've noticed even with the Zhou Play app for their gimbal, bitrate was a huge issue as well. So that's kind of something that's universal. And I think if one of them figures out how to do a better job at that, they'll have a substantial leg up over all the competition.